if you still naively believe that Antarctica is just a giant, harmless block of ice, a place reserved exclusively for clumsy penguins and meteorologists sweating bullets over climate change, then my condolences. You have been spectacularly led by the nose by the mainstream media. Try using your head for a moment. Since when have the European royals, people famous for being pragmatic, arrogant, and calculating every single penny of the commoner's tax money, silently poured mountains of cash into this deadliest refrigerator on Earth for over a century? No commercial profit, no resources to be mined, so what the hell are they looking for down there? Is it the ancient Peary race maps that depicted every mountain beneath the ice with precision before modern humans knew they existed? Is it Admiral Byrd's frantic warnings, erased from the files, about an enemy capable of flying from pole to pole? Or is it a truth so terrible that superpowers who usually hate each other like cats and dogs had to shake hands and sign the Antarctic Treaty to keep silent together? There is the burning smell of lies here, and believe me, it's not coming from climate change. Welcome back, curious souls, to Dark History. I am Zorro. Pull your chair closer, turn off the lights, because tonight we are going to rip apart this cold velvet curtain to see what the aristocrats are hiding under Mother Nature's bed. Look at your wallet. Would you ever spend millions of dollars just to buy a block of ice? Definitely not. But the European aristocracy would. For over a century, they have poured entire fortunes into Antarctica, the harshest white hell on the planet. Why? To study penguins? Don't be so naive. Let's go back in time to 1911. Imagine you are standing at the edge of the world, where the wind tears through your lungs and the cold feels like needles stabbing straight into your marrow. Roald Amundsen, the courageous Norwegian man, just planted the victory flag at the South Pole on December 14th. History books say he won the great race, a hero, period. But mainstream history is like an iceberg, my friend. The part that sticks up is beautiful, but the submerged part is what will kill you. In his private diary, a diary sealed tighter than nuclear secrets, Amundsen wrote something insane. He didn't talk about snow. He talked about traces. Not bear tracks, but geometric patterns. Sharp, square lines carved deep into the eternal ice walls. Symbols that made Amundsen shudder, not from the cold, but because they looked too much like the royal crests he had seen in the lavish palaces of Europe. What did he do? He kept silent. A wise silence. But do you know what's more interesting? That original diary evaporated from the archives in Oslo in 1952. Yes, it grew wings and flew away exactly when people started asking too many questions. All that remains are whispers among explorers in dingy taverns, men who swore they saw impossible things in the middle of the white desert. Fast forward to 2026. Declassified documents throw a naked truth in our faces. European royal families have secretly funded these expeditions for over 100 years. No commercial profit, no clear strategic advantage, no public recognition. So what are they looking for? Oil? Gold? Or an inheritance? Look at this map, the Peary Race map of 1513, an old piece of parchment drawn by an Ottoman admiral. It depicts the Antarctic coastline with chilling precision. But there is a small problem. It depicts mountains and rivers. Did you hear that clearly? Mountains and rivers, not ice. To see those things today, we need satellites and high-tech ground-penetrating radar. Yet an admiral from the 16th century could draw it, unless his data source came from an era when Antarctica wasn't frozen yet, an era when history tells us humans were still living in caves. When this map was rediscovered in 1929, academia panicked. But the royals? I bet they weren't surprised. they knew, and they wanted to take back what belonged to them. Look at King Haakon VII of Norway. He didn't just throw money at Amundsen for a vacation. Money flowed from the Norwegian crown into projects that yielded not a single penny of profit, only gathering geographic data and specimens that were stamped top secret immediately. Or the British royal family. Queen Victoria, the most powerful woman in the world at the time, did not stay on the sidelines. Her letters exchanged with explorers, released in trickles in the 1990s, are full of codes. She talks about preserving heritage. What heritage is there in a place with only ice and penguins, unless that heritage lies 2 miles beneath that ice? But the craziest story has to be the Swedes. In 1901, Otto Nordenskjöld led an expedition under the patronage of King Oscar II. Their mission was not random exploration. They were given specific coordinates. Where did the coordinates lead? To godforsaken, desolate places with absolutely no scientific value. When their ship was crushed by ice, the crew nearly died. The subsequent rescue mobilized a coordination of European royals on a scale so ridiculous for a mere scientific mission. Why save them at all costs? Because the survivors reported what they found. In the wind-shielded valleys, they saw stone structures. Official reports brushed it off. Those are natural geological formations. Funny. What natural formation has perfect right angles? The photos taken from that trip, currently sitting in private royal archives, show patterns that wind and ice could never create. They found something. A ruin, a city, or a gate. But the Swedes and the British were just the opening act. Because right after that, another dark force entered the game. A force obsessed with master races and occult powers. That's right. I'm talking about the Germans. And what they did in Antarctica in 1938 will make previous efforts look like child's play. The year is 1938. The whole world is holding its breath, waiting for the first gunshot in Europe. But while all eyes are fixed on Poland or France, Nazi Germany, those who were always one step ahead in crazy games, was looking south, very far south. They called it the German Antarctic Expedition. The official reason? Securing whaling grounds. Whales! Seriously? Hitler and his clique were preparing to dominate the world, and you think their top priority was margarine and soap from whale blubber? It was a clumsy lie, but enough to blind the public eye. In reality, the ship Schwabenland leaving the port of Hamburg didn't carry fishermen. It carried something far more dangerous. A fleet of Dornier Wall seaplanes, scientists, archaeologists, and military officers in numbers that were absurdly high for a fishing trip. What did they do there? They scoured the skies, photographing over 350,000 square kilometers of territory. And here is the interesting detail. They dropped thousands of metal poles engraved with the swastika onto the ice. Thousands of poles, as if they were driving stakes for a giant fence around their own private garden. They named this new land Neu Schwabenland, New Swabia. But why Antarctica? Why did Heinrich Himmler, the SS spy chief, a man obsessed with the occult, personally approve this mission? In internal documents, the German High Command didn't talk about oil or fat. They used strange terms like historical significance to the Aryan race. Himmler believed that somewhere under that ice was proof of the divine origin of the Germans, an ancient superior civilization. Atlantis? Hyperborea? Call it whatever you want, but they believed it was sleeping there, waiting for its children to return and wake it up. And the Germans, with their terrifying meticulousness, seemed to have found something. Expedition members later, those lucky enough to survive the war and willing to open their mouths, told of warm valleys. In the middle of the coldest continent on Earth, They found ice-free oases where geothermal heat warmed the ground. They spoke of massive caves leading deep underground and rock formations that looked more like the ruins of ancient temples than the work of Mother Nature. But the story didn't end when World War II broke out. Oh no, it only started getting weirder. Berlin fell, the thousand-year Reich collapsed into ashes, but on the seas, a strange phenomenon occurred. The German U-boat fleets, the notorious wolf packs, began to disappear. They didn't surrender. They weren't sunk. They simply vanished from radar screens. Allied intelligence went insane. Dozens of the most modern submarines of the time carrying what? Gold, secret technology, or the most important figures of the Nazi regime themselves. Testimony from some captured sailors revealed a destination: the South Pole. They spoke of transporting supplies to the last redoubt, a base hidden within the ice where the Third Reich could continue to exist. Was it real? The United States thought so, and their reaction was not to send a scientific exploration team. In 1946, just 1 year after the war ended, while the world was still licking its wounds, the U.S. launched Operation Highjump. Listen closely to these numbers: 4,700 Marines, 13 warships, including an aircraft carrier, 33 aircraft. Leading it was Admiral Richard Byrd, a living legend. The U.S. government called this a training and scientific survey mission. Training? You bring an aircraft carrier and nearly 5,000 troops to go ski training in Antarctica? No, my friend. That was an invasion force. That was an army armed to the teeth to face a specific enemy. They expected the operation to last 8 months, but after just 8 weeks, they ran away. That's right, the most powerful fleet in the world turned around and fled Antarctica in chaos. Planes crashed, ships were damaged, soldiers told of storms unlike anything on Earth. And when Byrd returned to Chile in a press conference that people later tried to wipe from public memory, he said a sentence that chilled the world to the bone. The United States must prepare to defend against hostile aircraft capable of flying from pole to pole with incredible speed. Hostile aircraft in 1947? Who had that kind of technology? The Soviets? Impossible. So what did Byrd encounter down there? Nazi U-boats? Or something else? Something that had been there long before humans knew how to draw maps. Byrd warned us. He shouted about the danger from the poles. And what was his reward? Silence. Immediately after the shocking interview in Chile, Washington did what they do best: gagging. Byrd was banned from speaking publicly. His personal file was stamped top secret. The great exploration hero suddenly became a ghost, his warning sinking into oblivion like a stone thrown into an abyss. But you can't hide an elephant in the living room, and you certainly can't hide a continent. The U.S. retreat didn't lower the temperature. On the contrary, it was like the scent of blood attracting sharks. The Soviets jumped in 1947. The British reinforced their fortresses. Argentina and Chile started shooting at British troops in 1952. Antarctica was no longer a science lab, it was becoming a powder keg. World War III seemed like it would start not in Berlin or Cuba, but on these eternal ice sheets. But then, a strange thing happened. A sudden silence covered everything. 1957 and 1958 were called the International Geophysical Year. Sounds noble and peaceful, doesn't it? Hostile nations shaking hands to study snow and ice. But what they found that year wasn't printed in the morning paper. Secret reports, things buried deep under tons of bureaucratic paperwork, tell a different story. First came the magnetic fields. Measurement instruments started going crazy. They detected magnetic anomalies so strong they couldn't be explained by iron ore or normal geology. Something underneath was emitting energy. Next were the seismographs. When they scanned the ice sheet, the sonic waves returned absurd data. There were massive gaps, giant hollow chambers lying deep underground, in places where the pressure of miles of ice should have crushed everything. Nature doesn't create empty rooms at the bottom of the world, my friend. And most terrifying, the lights. Dozens of reports from different research stations, US, Russian, British, all described strange objects in the sky. They didn't fly like airplanes. They moved with angles and speeds that defied physics, diving into the water and then shooting back up into the air. The superpowers saw them, and for the first time in history, they agreed on one thing. We need to keep this secret. Fear is the strongest unifying force. In 1959, the Antarctic Treaty was born. Read that text carefully. On the surface, it talks about environmental protection, demilitarization. Antarctica is the property of humanity. Sounds touching. But in reality, it suspended all territorial claims. It banned independent mining operations. And most importantly, it allowed the classification of research for 50 years. Why? Why would kings, queens, presidents, and dictators, people who never agree on anything, so quickly sign a piece of paper blockading an entire continent? They didn't sign a peace treaty. They signed a lockdown order, a quarantine zone. The Antarctic Treaty is a giant velvet curtain drawn to blind the audience, while backstage, the research continues. But this time, no press, no public oversight, only royal bloodlines and shadow governments. What are they guarding? Nazi bases? The legacy of an ancient civilization? Or a technology that could change the global balance of power overnight? We have walked through the past, through wars and deceitful treaties, but this story doesn't stay in the 20th century. Because there is an enemy that no treaty, no army can stop. That enemy is time and temperature. We are living in 2026. Look out the window or look at the weather report. The Earth is heating up. Scientists call it a climate crisis. Environmental activists call it the apocalypse. But for the most powerful families in Europe, the holders of the keys to the royal archives, the sound of melting ice in Antarctica is not the cry of the environment. It is a siren. Why? Because ice is history's most faithful keeper of secrets. It freezes corpses, freezes weapons, and freezes the truth. But when the ice melts, everything underneath will rise. Let's piece together everything we've discussed tonight. Ancient maps depicting a green Antarctica from the 16th century. Irrational investments by Norwegian, British, and Swedish kings in a dead land. The Nazi obsession with racial origins. And the retreat of the US military. All point in one direction. This is not a story about geographic conquest. This is a story about the inheritance. Declassified sources suggest an insane hypothesis that mainstream history dares not touch. That royal blood, what they proudly call blue blood, might have a direct connection to what is sleeping beneath that ice. Why would they spend tons of money to protect a wasteland? Unless it is their old home. Unless their power, the divine right of kings that they have preached for 1,000 years, does not come from God, but comes from a civilization that existed at the South Pole before the frost swallowed it? The Antarctic Treaty of 1959 is like a lid on a pressure cooker, but that lid can only hold back humans. It cannot hold back Mother Nature. As giant icebergs break away, modern satellites, the god eyes that Peary race could not dream of, are starting to capture strange things. Geometric structures exposed under melting snow, unidentified heat sources, signals that governments are trying to jam. The question, who actually controls Antarctica, is now no longer a political issue. It is a survival issue. If the technologies or the entities or the historical truths buried down there are revealed, it will rewrite everything. It will tear up textbooks. It will overturn religions. And most importantly, it will change how we view those sitting on the thrones of power. Perhaps that is why they are afraid. Perhaps that is why the world is suddenly busy with wars, plagues, and crises everywhere. Perfect smokescreens to distract us from the most important event happening at the bottom of the world. The ice is getting thinner, my friend, and so is the time for silence. When Antarctica is mentioned, what do you think of? Clumsy penguins, giant icebergs serving as backdrops for disaster movies, or shaggy, bearded scientists measuring snow depth to warn about climate change? If that's all you know, then congratulations. You are a model citizen. You have swallowed the sedative pill that mainstream history force-fed you. But today, we won't talk about the climate. We will talk about ambition. We will peel back the glamorous veneer of great explorers to see that underneath, they were not heroes seeking knowledge. No, my friend, they were pawns, agents, treasure hunters for the darkest forces of the 20th century. Let's go back to the story of the movie star of American exploration, Admiral Richard Byrd. Byrd, America's darling, a scion of Virginia lineage, friend of politicians, hero of the skies. In 1928, Byrd established the Little America base and began redrawing maps of lands no one had ever set foot on. The public hailed him as a modern-day Columbus. But this is where things get interesting. Byrd didn't just take money from American industrial tycoons. In the shadows, he was a pen pal with the European aristocracy. At Ohio State University, dusty letters are telling a different story. The British and Norwegian royals didn't ask Byrd about penguins. They asked about chillingly specific things. They asked about ice-free valleys. They asked about geological anomalies. Imagine you are in London or Oslo, sitting on a velvet throne. Why would you care about an ice-free valley at the end of the world unless you knew it was there? And Byrd answered them. He admitted finding them, but he was confused. He didn't know how to explain it. After Operation Highjump in 1947, a massive military campaign we will dissect later, Byrd changed. From a hero who loved to brag, he became secretive. Interviews became bland. He spoke like a politician hiding a scandal. What did Byrd see? Why was his final trip in 1956 sealed in Navy secret archives? Perhaps his death in 1957 was the only way to keep that secret dormant forever. But Byrd is just one piece of the puzzle. Look over to Norway. King Haakon VII. This king didn't simply sit on a throne and wave. He personally funded Roald Amundsen, and in private letters that the Norwegian archives had to wait until the 80s to dare reveal a part of, Haakon spoke like a sleepwalker between history and myth. He didn't talk about planting flags to expand territory. He talked about heritage. He believed that Norwegians had a connection to Antarctica from before modern history even began. Listen to my words carefully. A modern king of the 20th century believing his Viking ancestors had been to Antarctica. He spoke of lands beyond the horizon that history books had erased. Haakon wasn't funding exploration. He was funding a homecoming. He believed in things that history professors would laugh in your face about. But when a king believes in it, it's no longer a joke. And of course, this crazy party cannot lack the Nazis. Heinrich Himmler. This guy wasn't just a butcher. He was a fanatic with delusions of superior racial origins. Himmler believed the Aryans were descendants of gods, and the proof of that superiority lay beneath the Antarctic ice. In 1938, the new Swabia expedition was launched. Himmler's goal was not oil or whales. He wanted to find home. He believed Antarctica was once the residence of an advanced ancient civilization, the ancestors of the Germans. He wanted to find the inherited lands. Ridiculous, right? But this ridiculousness was backed by the budget of an entire nation. Himmler poured SS money into it to search for artifacts, to search for ancient Germanic tribes. He went looking for a wild dream with very real resources. And terrifyingly, the reports sent back to him didn't say, "Sir, there is only ice here." They spoke of other things, things that made his twisted beliefs even firmer. Don't be too quick to laugh at the Germans. The British, the masters of discretion, were also playing this game. Lord Curzon, former Viceroy of India. He believed the power of the British Empire lay not in guns and ammo, but in holding the secret of human origins. He pushed the British Antarctic Survey to drill ice, not to check the weather, but to find evidence of prehistory. Curzon suspected the ice sheet was younger than we thought. And if the ice is younger, then what lay there before the ice covered it? And there we have Ernest Shackleton, the tragic hero. Textbooks praise him for his miraculous survival. But the truth? Shackleton was a poor, two-faced man. On one hand, he was an explorer. On the other, he was a spy for King George V. He collected specimens, but didn't send them to museums. He sent them straight to high-walled royal collections. Shackleton had to serve his own ambitions and serve the whispers of the aristocracy. Some say his heart broke at age 47, not because of the cold, but because of the weight of the secrets he was forced to carry. Do you see the full picture yet? The US, UK, Norway, Nazi Germany. Politically, they were enemies, allies, rivals. But in Antarctica, they were birds of a feather. They weren't looking for land. They were looking for proof. Proof of a forgotten past. Proof of the origins of royal bloodlines. Proof of civilizations that had been wiped out. Their motives were both ultranationalist and mystical. And the most terrifying part is the tacit cooperation. When it comes to secrets under the ice, royal families seem to forget national borders. They share what their governments hide. If I gave you a piece of paper and asked you to draw the exact circuit diagram of an iPhone 15, could you do it? Of course not. Unless you are an Apple engineer or you had that blueprint beforehand. This is the elephant in the room that mainstream science hates to mention. The biggest mystery of Antarctica lies not in ice and snow, but in ink and paper. How could people living in the 16th and 17th centuries, people who still believed the Earth was the center of the universe, draw the Antarctic coastline with a precision we only recently achieved thanks to satellites and sonar? Meet Admiral Piri Reis, Ottoman Empire. Piri Reis, a naval admiral and cartographer, drew this parchment. He didn't make it up. Reis noted very clearly in the margins. He compiled it from 20 different source maps. Some came from the time of Alexander the Great, which is the 4th century BC. Look here. This is the Queen Maud Land region of Antarctica. But is there anything strange? No ice. It shows rivers, valleys, a jagged coastline. When Professor Charles Hapgood studied this map in the 60s, a chill ran down his spine. This coastline matches perfectly with the actual terrain of Antarctica if you peel off the mile-thick layer of ice. What does this mean? It means someone flew up into the sky or used sonar or they were there. They were there when Antarctica was a green continent before it was swallowed by frost. History tells us Antarctica has been frozen for millions of years. This map says, dead wrong. it only froze recently. If Piri Reis isn't enough to make you lose sleep, look at Oronce Finet, year 1531. A French cartographer who never left his library, yet drew Antarctica detailed down to every mountain range. But the slap in the face of the scientific community lies here. Finet didn't draw Antarctica as a solid block. He drew it as two giant islands connected, separated by a narrow strip of land. For 400 years, people laughed at him. Rich imagination there, Orance. Until we had ground-penetrating radar in the 20th century. And guess what the radar found under the ice? Exactly. Two large land masses, connected together. How did he know? Unless his speculation was actually copying from ancient documents we have lost. Documents from an era when humans used to walk on Antarctic ground like a walk in the park. And then came Philippe Bois in 1737. He drew a strait running straight through the continent, splitting Antarctica in two. Today we call it the Transantarctic Basin, but it is lying under thousands of meters of ice. The naked eye cannot see it. Bois claimed he got the information from ancient Greek sources. Ancient Greece knew about the subglacial topography of Antarctica? Does that sound crazy? There are two possibilities here, and both are equally terrifying. 1. The ancients possessed superior technology we cannot imagine. 2. Antarctica only froze recently, and human history is older, far more complex than what textbooks teach you. And this is where the craziest people of the 20th century stepped in. The Nazis weren't stupid. They were crazy, cruel, but not stupid. Himmler and his clique were obsessed with these maps. They saw in them not geography, but proof of power. If the ancients used to live in Antarctica, and if the Germans are the descendants of that master race, then retaking Antarctica isn't invasion, it is coming home. In 1938, the new Swabia expedition set off. Their mission, verify the ancient maps. They brought archaeologists, not to dig ice, but to find ruins. And what did they find? Secret reports after the war, whispers from old SS veterans, all mentioned one thing: the oases. They reported ice-free valleys warmed by geothermal heat. They saw vegetation. They saw hot springs steaming amidst the frozen hell. But more terrifyingly, some swore they saw symbols, carvings on rock cliffs, structures too regular to be natural. They believed they had found the entrance. Entrance leading to what? An ancient base? Or a world inside the earth? Himmler's interpretation might be sick, but what the new Swabia expedition found was real. Those geological anomalies are real, and it explains why, even when Berlin collapsed, the Americans still frantically rushed to Antarctica with a war fleet. They were afraid of what the Germans had awakened, Operation Highjump. The name sounds like a joke, but it was a march into darkness. Admiral Byrd returned, this time not as an explorer, but as a military commander. And he was about to face the biggest nightmare of his life. In 1946, World War II had just ended. The world was licking its wounds. But the U.S. Navy? Oh no, they were busy preparing for a picnic. They called it Operation Highjump. Officially, this was a training exercise and scientific research mission. Sounds humane, right? But let's look at their camping gear list. 1 aircraft carrier, USS Philippine Sea. 12 other warships including icebreakers, destroyers, and tankers. 33 combat aircraft. And 4,700 troops armed to the teeth. I don't know about you, but when I go penguin watching or measuring ice thickness, I usually don't bring an entire aircraft carrier strike group. You don't need 4,000 Marines to fight off SEALs, unless those SEALs are equipped with laser guns. So what were they really there for? To hunt down Nazi remnants hiding out? or to verify the map anomalies that Admiral Byrd had obsessed over for half his life. Original plan: the campaign would last 6 to 8 months. Reality: they fled after just a few weeks. The official reason given was bad weather. Of course, it's always storming in Antarctica, but leaked reports tell a different story. Planes crashing for unknown reasons, soldiers going missing. There were insane rumors that the expedition encountered something that did not welcome them. And when Admiral Byrd returned, he was no longer the confident man of the past. In a shocking interview with the Chilean newspaper El Mercurio in 1947, Byrd uttered a warning that chilled the military to the bone. He said that the United States needed to prepare immediately to defend against threats from fighters capable of flying from pole to pole with incredible speed. Let that sentence sink into your head. Flying from pole to pole. That was not 1947 technology. That didn't even look like human technology at the time. What did Byrd see? Who did he clash with? Immediately upon arriving back in the U.S., Byrd was gagged. He was interrogated by intelligence agencies, and the files of the trip were stamped top secret. What he wrote in his diary during the final days of his life remains in the shadows, locked tight in Navy archives. But you can't hide an elephant with a basket forever. The panic of the superpowers after the Highjump event led to one of the biggest political theatrics of the 20th century. The Antarctic Treaty was born. On the surface, this is a masterpiece of peace. 12 nations agreed to suspend all territorial disputes. No militarization, only for science. The world applauded. A continent of peace. But look closer, my detectives. This treaty is essentially an iron cage. It mandates that all scientific discoveries must be shared. Sounds transparent? Mistake. If all nations agree to share information, they also agree to control information. It created a mechanism I call federalized secrecy. Previously, secrets belonged to individual nations. Now secrets are managed by an international committee. No one is allowed to unilaterally announce shocking things. This treaty bans independent explorers. You can't just sail a boat to Antarctica and wander around looking for artifacts. You need a permit. You need supervision. You need to follow a pre-charted route. Why protect it so strictly if there is only ice and rock there? The answer is heartbreakingly simple: to protect the history that we currently believe in. If one day it is announced that Antarctica was the cradle of human civilization, or worse, the dwelling place of technologies far beyond our understanding, then the power structure of this world would collapse. Religion, history, politics, all would have to be rewritten. And they, the ones who signed that paper in 1959, would rather keep us in the dark than let the light topple their thrones. But no matter how hard they try to cover it up, physical evidence always finds a way to rise to the surface. Fragments of the truth are still scattered out there, waiting for someone to piece them together. People often say, words fly away, but black ink on white paper stays. I want to correct that a bit. Paper can be burned, but rock and ice do not know how to lie. We have talked about kings, admirals, and secret treaties. But where is the evidence? Where is the smoking gun in the case of the century? The answer lies scattered in museums, diaries with torn pages, and under miles of ice that only modern technology can see through. Let's start with the first witnesses. Roald Amundsen, the first person to reach the South Pole. In the official copy of his diary at the Norwegian Polar Institute, everything is perfect. But the truth is, the most important pages have vanished. In the original version, which is alleged to reside in a private royal collection, Amundsen describes unusual traces on the ice walls. He redrew geometric patterns. Nature, my friends, is chaotic. Nature does not create straight lines or perfect right angles on cliffs. Amundsen knew that, and someone else knew that these sketches were not allowed to be made public. Then came Frank Wild, Shackleton's deputy. On the 1914 trip in the Weddell Sea region, Wild found stones carved with characters. He described them as resembling ancient runes, but weathered to the point that their age must exceed the Viking era by 1,000 years. Those stones were sent to the British Museum in 1917. And then, puff, gone. Museum records say wartime disruption. How convenient. A black hole swallowing history right in the heart of London. But the most terrifying evidence comes from the people with cameras. George Dufek. A name you should remember. He participated in Operation Highjump and later returned to Antarctica many times. In the 60s, Dufek let slip about photos classified as secret. He had seen ice-free valleys, but not just rocks and moss. He described structures with straight edges and right angles. Imagine, in the middle of a white, snowy wasteland, an artificial structure rises up, half buried. Is it a ruin or a monument? Dufek went silent right after that. Those photos were never declassified, but on the dark web, leaked images still float around, showing bizarre geometric blocks that NASA or the Navy never confirm, nor do they bother to deny. And now, let science speak. Ground-penetrating radar doesn't know how to lie. Since the 80s, we started looking through the ice, and what did we find? Massive voids. Natural caves? Maybe. But what about the regular geometric patterns in the bedrock structure? Geology cannot explain that arrangement, especially Lake Vostok, a massive liquid lake, the size of Lake Ontario, lying miles under the ice, in eternal darkness. The water there is warm, warmer than normal geothermal levels can explain. There is a heat source down there. Is it a volcano? Or is it some kind of energy active down there? The Russians drilled down to it. The Americans watched closely, and once again the most sensitive data about the chemistry and temperature of the lake vanished behind a security curtain. We also cannot ignore the dry valleys, the only place in Antarctica without snow. Here, scientists found plant fossils in the Beacon Sandstone, temperate plants. This means Antarctica was once green, and worse for mainstream history. This climate change might have happened much more recently than the millions of years figure they keep chanting. If Antarctica was green when humans had already appeared on Earth, then the entire story of human civilization must be rewritten from the first page. Try asking for permission to go to Queen Maud Land. This area, on paper, is Norway's backyard. You want to go there? Fine. But first you have to get on your knees and ask the Norwegian government for permission. And guess what? Unless you are a scientist with legitimate goals, by their definition, the answer is always a cold refusal. Why are they so picky about guests in a place with only ice and snow? The answer lies in disjointed pieces that they, the ones in power, think we are too stupid to put together. A strange weather phenomenon, a radar glitch, a rock that looks like a pyramid. Standing alone, they are coincidences. But when you place them side by side, a naked picture emerges. Antarctica is not as desolate as we think. There is a pattern, a systematic silence spanning decades. Governments aren't ignoring Antarctica. They are investigating it in the shadows. What is under that permafrost? Ruins of an ancient civilization? Alien technology? Or the last hideout of a fallen empire? Let's go back in time to 1945. World War II ends. Berlin falls. The Nazis surrender. But in the Atlantic, ghosts still lurk beneath the water's surface. We are talking about the U-boats. In the final months of the war, their activity in the South Atlantic suddenly spiked abnormally. Not to hunt merchant ships, but to go somewhere. Look at the files of U-530 and U-977. These two steel monsters surrendered in Argentina in July and August of 1945. August, the war ended in May. For 3 long months, what were they doing? Their commanders claimed they were just trying to flee, to find a safe harbor. Really? A 3-month pleasure cruise in the middle of the ocean while the whole world is hunting you? I don't buy that story, and Allied intelligence at the time didn't either. Interrogation transcripts, documents once stamped secret, show that American and British officers didn't ask about tactics. They asked frantically about Antarctica. They interrogated the crew about rumors spreading in the German fleet, about a secret base, a southern fortress where submarines could resupply and hide. The crew denied it all. Of course. But the panic in the Allied intelligence questions gave it all away. They were afraid that the Nazis had managed to build something at the end of the world. Do you think the British just sat there drinking tea when they heard this rumor? Not at all. As early as 1943, while bombs were still falling on London, Britain quietly launched Operation Tabarin. Nominally, this was a scientific mission to establish sovereignty. But don't be fooled. The real objective was clearly stated in declassified documents: to watch for enemy shipping and deny footholds to other nations. Who were they hunting in that giant freezer? Certainly not penguins. Reports from Tabarin agents mention finding mysterious caches of equipment in ice-free valleys. These items could have been of German origin. They were packed up and sent to London for analysis. And then, boom, missing. Not a trace in public archives. What did they find? A German can of Spam? Or a map leading underground? The disappearance of this evidence is even more suspicious than its existence. Now, I want you to do a thought exercise. Put yourself in the shoes of a U-boat commander in May 1945. You receive news that Berlin has fallen. You know what awaits you back home: court-martial, a hangman's noose, or rotting in prison for war crimes. But in your breast pocket you have a coordinate, a number whispered in smoky officer clubs. They talked about geothermal valleys in Antarctica, where heat from the earth keeps the water from ever freezing. A natural harbor amidst the white hell. What would you do? Turn back to surrender and die in disgrace? Or order the crew, dive, head south? It was a suicide run. Icebergs, storms, running out of fuel. But when you break through the polar circle, giant white cliffs appear. And then, amidst the mist, you see it. A cave entrance, water steaming, a hidden paradise. Does this scenario sound crazy? Like a B-grade Hollywood movie? Maybe. But logistically, it is plausible. A geothermal valley could provide warmth. Seals and fish could provide food. Stockpiles from the 1938 German expedition could provide initial equipment. Humans are a terrifyingly resilient species. We survived the Ice Age, the plague, the atomic bomb. A desperate group of people, armed to the teeth, could absolutely hold out there. But the Nazis weren't the only ones eyeing this dead land. When the Cold War broke out, another giant also began turning its bloodshot eyes toward Antarctica. And what they found was even scarier than rusting submarines. Welcome back. In the last part, we left the German U-boats disappearing into the mist of the Southern Ocean. You think the story ends there? No, that was just the prelude. When Germany collapsed, another giant entered the playground, the Soviet Union. In the 1950s and 1960s, while the world was busy with the Antarctic Treaty, a beautiful piece of paper promising peace and science, the Soviets were playing a completely different game. Secret documents from the Cold War show that Moscow didn't just send meteorologists to measure the wind. They sent spies. Why was the Soviet Union so obsessed with Antarctica? They believed the continent held top-secret strategic value. They wanted to set up listening stations, giant ears placed at the end of the world to monitor the entire global communication system without being watched by the West. But here is the most interesting part. The secrecy of the Soviet expeditions was abnormal, even by their standards. Russian researchers over drinks leaked rumors that made listeners' blood run cold. They didn't just find ice. They talked about discovering artificial structures, abandoned facilities lying deep in remote inland areas that no map recorded. Who built them? The Germans? Or someone who was there before? Official Kremlin reports are, of course, scrubbed clean. But that silence only makes the echo of the rumors more piercing. Now let's leave the Russian snowmobiles and step into the cozy, velvet-carpeted rooms of the European aristocracy. You think Antarctica is only for shaggy, bearded explorers? Mistake. For the elite and royal families, Antarctica represents something more precious than gold: insurance. Look at 20th century European history. Revolutions, wars, dynasties collapsing. If you were a king or a grand duke, what would you do when the throne wobbles? You need a place to run. A place where angry mobs can't find you and missiles can't target. Aristocratic money doesn't travel in a straight line. It flows through trust funds, charities, winding through zigzag paths to erase traces. A portion of that massive cash flow poured into Antarctic research. But what percentage was for science, and how much was for private projects? Imagine secret settlements, luxurious wintering stations built quietly, waiting for the day the world collapses to welcome their masters. Sounds like a madman's conspiracy theory? Maybe. But when you have enough money to buy a whole country, building a comfortable cave in Antarctica is a small matter. I know what you're thinking. Come on, Zorro. How can humans live there long-term without anyone knowing? Satellites would see everything. Oh, you are too naive. Look at the numbers. Antarctica is 14 million square kilometers wide. It is larger than Europe. Most of this continent has never, I repeat, never had a human footprint. Satellites? Yes, we have satellites, but they don't photograph every square meter every day in high resolution. A small outpost, cleverly camouflaged under a deep valley, or situated inside an ice cave, it would be invisible to the god eye of Google Earth. And how to live. Temperature. Don't forget Antarctica has volcanoes, geothermal regions. Imagine massive ice caves naturally heated by heat from the Earth. You don't need electric heaters. Mother Nature took care of that part. Food. The Southern Ocean is incredibly rich in protein. Seals, fish, penguins. Sorry, conservationists. A small community could live off hunting, just like the Inuit in the Arctic have done for thousands of years. Psychology. This is the hardest part. The eternal darkness of winter, absolute isolation. It could drive a normal person mad, but history has proven humans are the most resilient cockroaches. Sailors abandoned on desert islands, Shackleton's expedition stuck in the ice. They survived. With thorough preparation and iron discipline, something the German military or the aristocracy never lack. Maintaining life is entirely possible. But to do that, they need a support network, a secret society to keep secrets from leaking out. And that is exactly what we will peel apart in the next section. A tangled spider web connecting London to Berlin, from banks to geographical societies. We've talked about German submarines and Russian spies. But how do you keep a secret about a continent 14 million square kilometers wide for nearly a century? You can't just rely on guns. You need something stronger, the silence of the elite. Look at London. 1830. The Royal Geographical Society, RGS, is born. On the surface, this is a gathering place for respectable scientists, brave explorers sharing about beetles or new glaciers. But look closer. Who are its members? Monarchs, aristocrats, and industrial tycoons. This isn't just a science club, it is a command center. Leaked documents show the RGS operated an inner council. These meetings never had published minutes. Its members were not just British, but also included representatives from other European royal families. Here, the most sensitive discoveries about Antarctica were placed on mahogany tables under dim yellow light for review. They acted as truth filters. What you read in newspapers or National Geographic magazines are just breadcrumbs they threw out. And the real loaf of bread? It is kept in locked rooms, where loyalty to noble lineage is more important than loyalty to the nation. Now let's talk about something people often whisper about, but rarely dare to name directly: the Freemasons. Before you roll your eyes and think I'm a crazy conspiracy theorist, look at the membership list. This is historical fact, not fiction. Admiral Richard E. Byrd, the American man who flew over Antarctica and explored it more than anyone, was a member of Federal Lodge No. 1 in Washington, D.C. King Haakon of Norway, the holder of the key to Queen Maud Land, was a Freemason. And a host of British aristocrats, the financiers of the trip south, all wore the apron of the order. Why is this important? Because Freemasonry creates a brotherhood that transcends borders. When the outside world was tearing each other apart in world wars or the Cold War, inside the closed rooms of the order, these brothers could still shake hands and exchange information. It created a perfect underground communication channel. An American explorer could share secrets with a Norwegian noble without going through cumbersome diplomatic channels. Were they coordinating a grand plan in Antarctica, or simply friends with the same hobby? Whatever it is, this personnel overlap is too huge to ignore. Antarctic exploration isn't cheap. Icebreakers, supplies, equipment cost mountains of money, and government budgets are often insufficient or cannot be spent on dark purposes. Who fills that gap? Welcome the Rothschild clan and the powerful banking families of Europe. Letters from old archives show an underground cash flow from these banks into the pockets of expedition teams, but they didn't wire transfer directly with the memo funding secret base construction. Oh no, they are much smarter than that. Money went through trust funds, innocuous charities, paths so winding that even the tax office had to surrender. And in return, what did the bankers get? Not just interest. They demanded private reports. They wanted to know what the expeditions really found before the government knew. They acted as information brokers. They held secrets that could change human history and used them as currency in power deals. Finally, look at the spies of the 20th century. MI6, CIA, KGB. You think they only serve the fatherland? Don't be naive. Many high-ranking intelligence officers came from the aristocracy. They went to the same schools, married each other's sisters, and went hunting together on weekends. They lived in two parallel worlds. On one hand, they were diligent civil servants. On the other, they were members of this elite network. Declassified documents show a strange pattern. Information about Antarctica was shared between rival intelligence agencies unusually often, but there was also information intercepted, never reaching the desk of the president or prime minister. Why? Because it was diverted to the aristocratic channel. These spies acted as gatekeepers. They ensured that secrets about Antarctica, whether ancient technology, rare resources, or hidden bases, only stayed in the hands of the worthy by their standards. Look at the Antarctic Treaty. Textbooks tell you it is a shining symbol of peace and science where nations hold hands and sing songs of friendship. I call it the biggest joke of the century. In reality, this treaty created a perfect international bureaucracy to manage collective secrecy. It is not transparent. It is opaque. Member nations meet in closed rooms, sharing information under strict security rules. What they release to the public is just the tip of the iceberg, innocuous data about snow density or penguin migration. And the truly important things, geological anomalies, signs of civilization, they are stopped right at the door. This treaty allows them to control who gets to go there, who gets to dig, and most importantly, who gets to speak. It's like an agreement between mafia bosses. We divide the territory and no one is allowed to talk to the police. You think national archives are the safest place to preserve history? Think again. When it comes to Antarctica, archives suddenly become suspiciously clumsy. Look at the files of Operation Highjump, USA 1946 to 1947. 80 years have passed. 80 years. Yet most of the files remain in the top secret category. What are they hiding? Technology from the 40s? Ridiculous. Unless what they found there is still a threat, or a truth too shocking, to this very day. And that's not all. The Norwegian Polar Institute reports that the original diary of legendary explorer Roald Amundsen has disappeared. The British Museum has artifacts from Antarctica that were never entered into the management catalog. Royal archives occasionally suffer fires or floods at just the right time to incinerate exactly those boxes of sensitive documents. This is not carelessness. This is systematic archival manipulation, a way of saying, sorry, the dog ate history's homework. So what about modern scientists? Why don't they speak up? Simple. Bread and butter. To do research in Antarctica, you need money, lots of money, and permits. Both of these are in the hands of governments and international committees. If a glaciologist discovers a strange structure under the ice and decides to announce it to the press instead of reporting it privately to superiors, boom, funding cut, permit revoked, career ruined. You will be labeled paranoid, boycotted by the scientific community. That is brutal professional pressure. This system encourages self-censorship. Scientists learn to look but not see, or write reports in vague language to avoid trouble. They choose the safety of their careers over the danger of the truth. And who can blame them? So, what is the big picture? Antarctica is not a forgotten wasteland. It is the stage for the most vibrant underground activities on the planet. Information from this frozen continent does not flow straight to you. It goes through a maze, discovered by explorers, already controlled, filtered by societies and private foundations of the aristocracy, analyzed by intelligence, MI6, CIA, KGB, stamped secret by governments, and finally the remaining crumbs are thrown to the public. We are living in a heavily edited world. But remember this, the ice is melting, literally and figuratively. As the permafrost recedes, secrets buried for centuries will be exposed to the sunlight. U-boats, ancient cities, or forgotten technologies, they won't be able to stay silent forever. Imagine you are a young journalist full of passion. You hear a rumor about a strange structure, an unusual energy source at latitude 80 south. You start digging, and immediately you slam headfirst into a reinforced concrete wall covered in velvet. This mechanism works incredibly smoothly. Any story about Antarctic mysteries that reaches the press is immediately buried by official sources. They don't ban you from speaking. They do something crueler. They turn you into a joke. Government spokespeople will stand on podiums, smile, and say that what you saw was just an optical illusion, a light refraction phenomenon on ice, or simply that you've watched too many sci-fi movies. Prestigious scientific agencies, places that receive billions of dollars in government funding, will nod in agreement. The message sent is very clear. Do you want to keep your press pass? Do you want to continue being invited to press conferences? Then write about climate change. Don't ask about those deep black holes. Major media outlets understand the rules of this game. They survive on relationships with the government. Challenging the official narrative means cutting off the source of news. So, they choose the safe route, repeating like a parrot whatever they are fed. And independent researchers, the stubborn ones, they are pushed to the fringes of society. Their work is labeled conspiracy theory, thrown into the same basket as flat earthers or lizard people believers. They are isolated, stripped of their voice in mainstream discussions. A professional death, painful, but at least they are still breathing. But not everyone is that lucky. Sometimes ridicule is not enough. Sometimes someone holds pieces of the puzzle that are too dangerous, things that cannot be explained by natural phenomena. At this point, the velvet glove is removed, and the iron fist is revealed. You might receive a subpoena, threatening jail time for violating national security laws. Or more chillingly, one fine evening, men in black suits knock on your door, politely reminding you of the non-disclosure agreement you signed 10 years ago, with a cold smile implying the safety of your family. And then, there are those who never return. Let's talk about Brian Mullins, a diligent British researcher working in Antarctic Treaty compliance in the 70s. Brian wasn't a dreamer, he was a bureaucrat. But he made a fatal mistake. He got curious. Brian told colleagues he had found buried documents from the 1940s, the era of secret wartime expeditions. He was about to publish them. And boom, a car accident. Investigation conclusion, traffic accident risk. No suspicious signs. The file closed faster than blowing out a match. A coincidence? Maybe. But let's fast forward to 1998. Jérôme Truffaut, a brilliant French glaciologist. Jérôme didn't study politics. He studied ice. And he claimed he had found undeniable evidence of artificial structures deep under the Antarctic ice sheet. Not rocks, not natural caves. Artificial structures. Jérôme was scheduled to present this shocking discovery at an international scientific conference. Plane tickets booked, presentation ready. But he never reached that podium. A sudden heart attack took his life right on the eve of the event. Do you know what the most interesting part is? Immediately after he died, his office was raided. All research documents, hard drives, notes about that structure evaporated. No trace left. Dying of a heart attack is common. But dying of a heart attack plus the disappearance of a lifetime's data right before revealing the truth? That is a message. A voiceless corpse lying there to warn the living. Do not cross the red line. To operate such a massive concealment apparatus, you need a legal framework. And that is when the Antarctic Treaty steps onto the stage wearing the cloak of a saint. On the surface, this treaty is humanity's dream, banning military activity, sharing scientific information, turning Antarctica into a land of peace. Sounds noble, right? But look closely at the fine print. It is a masterpiece of the art of legal preemption. The treaty creates an illusion of transparency. But in reality, protocols allow nations to classify any finding as sensitive and stamp secret on it. Compliance verification mechanisms? A joke. Member nations self-report their activities. Imagine a thief self-reporting to the police about what he stole. There is no real independent oversight to ensure they are telling the whole truth. Then they added environmental protection protocols. sounds very humane, protecting wild nature. But essentially, it creates restricted areas. These special zones are strictly cordoned off, banning all unauthorized personnel from entering. Why? To protect moss and birds? Or to prevent anyone from loitering near giant ventilation shafts or ruins that satellites accidentally captured? These regulations are the perfect shield. They use law and environmental ethics to prevent independent verification. You can't go there to check, because if you do, you are an environmental vandal. A genius move. However, no dam can hold back water forever. No matter how many people they kill, no matter how many journalists they threaten, information still leaks. It flows out from the cracks of time. Retired researchers, when death is near, no longer fear losing their jobs. With a guilty conscience, they start recounting what they saw during lonely guard shifts in the middle of snowstorms. Then comes bureaucracy. Administrative machines are sometimes too bulky. Documents are declassified automatically by procedure that officials forgot to intervene in. Old photos leak from private collections. And the internet, the nightmare of every intelligence agency. It allows information sharing across every border, every checkpoint. Of course, accompanying that is garbage and disinformation, another counterintelligence tactic to confuse real information. But amidst that pile of trash, diamonds of truth still sparkle. The balance between containment and disclosure is an endless war. What was buried in the 50s resurfaces in the 90s. Each generation asks questions their fathers were forbidden to ask. The truth about Antarctica is like a monster chained in the basement. You can hide it, but you can't stop its growls from shaking the entire house. And those growls have reshaped our entire geopolitical world in ways you couldn't imagine. Don't take your eyes off the screen, because in the next part, I will show you the real power game behind the fake handshake of peace of the superpowers. Do you see something strange here? The 20th century. The world is holding its breath. The US and Soviet Union are pointing thousands of nuclear warheads at each other's bedrooms. They fight over every inch of land in Berlin, every island in the Caribbean, racing every meter into space. But then, in 1959 in Washington, D.C., a miracle, or rather a magic trick, happened. Two giants wanting to tear each other apart suddenly shook hands. And they shook hands over the frozen corpse of Antarctica. Welcome to Part 2, where we peel back the greatest lie of modern diplomacy, the Antarctic Treaty. Let's go back to 1959. 12 nations sat at the negotiation table. The result was a dreamlike document. Antarctica would be a demilitarized zone, reserved only for science and peace. But use your cold head. The US and USSR, cooperating, at the peak of the Cold War, ridiculous. The truth is, both these superpowers found something in Antarctica during the International Geophysical Year, 1957 to 1958. Something that made them realize competing here is more dangerous than sharing. Imagine two thieves breaking into a treasury together. Instead of shooting each other and alerting the police, they decide to split the key. The Antarctic Treaty is not a peace document. It is a ceasefire for mutual concealment. It removed Antarctica from the Cold War chessboard, turning it into a buffer zone where superpowers coordinate to manage secrets they deemed too sensitive for the public to know. This cooperation came at a price: absolute lack of transparency. They created a closed club where information is shared among members, but doors are bolted shut to the rest of the world. Now, look at this map. Before the treaty was signed, 7 nations, the UK, Norway, France, Australia, New Zealand, Chile, and Argentina, rushed to carve up Antarctica like vultures. Overlapping territorial claims, ready to explode into war. What did the 1959 treaty do? It froze everything. It created a monstrous thing called status quo. Basically, it says, you keep your claim, but you can't enforce it. We will pretend like no one owns this place. The consequence? Antarctica became the only land on Earth without clear sovereignty. A no man's land. Why do they like this ambiguity? Because ambiguity brings flexibility. If sovereignty were clearly defined, they would have to answer the question, why do you want this desolate piece of land so much? And the answer might force them to admit the discoveries that fueled their greed in the first place. They would rather keep it in the shadows where no one truly owns it, but the elite group holds full de facto control. This is the most sophisticated part of the play. After the turbulent 1940s and 1950s with military campaigns like Highjump, suddenly, research direction turned 180 degrees. Before that, people were interested in exploration, topographic surveys, searching for new lands. Afterwards, it was all climate, geology, and environmental monitoring. Don't get me wrong, climate science is very important. But this sudden shift was not random. It was a calculated misdirection. They steered public and academic attention away from questions about archaeology and anthropology. Why does no one organize large-scale excavations to search for traces of prehistoric civilization in Antarctica? Because the protocols of the treaty discourage it. They say, do not disturb historical sites for preservation. Sound familiar? Do not touch artifacts is essentially do not look for artifacts. They framed the mindset of the whole world. Antarctica has always been isolated, never inhabited by humans. Any question going against this assumption is considered unscientific, pushed off the funding list. Science in Antarctica, under the direction of the treaty, has become a kaleidoscope. It shows you beautiful images of ice and atmosphere, but it prevents you from looking through the glass to see what really lies beneath. But no matter how hard they try to wear the white lab coat of science, beneath that coat, guns and ammo have never left Antarctica. You think the military left after 1959? You think the treaty banning the military is absolute? Oh no, my friend. In the next part, we will unmask the civilian research stations and see how intelligence agencies turned the white continent into a spy playground. Hold on to your seats, because we are about to enter the gray zone. Demilitarization. That is the phrase they used to lull us to sleep in the 1959 treaty. They say Antarctica is the only place on Earth absent of military. No guns, no artillery, no nuclear bases. Only gray-bearded scientists measuring ice thickness. Believe me, if you believe that, I have a piece of land on Mars I want to sell you cheap. The truth is, the military never left Antarctica. They just changed costumes. Look at the so-called logistics support. This is the greatest screen of the 20th century. The U.S. operates Operation Deep Freeze. The name sounds like a frozen food preservation project, but essentially it is a massive military operation. Navy, Air Force personnel, military icebreakers, C-130 Hercules, heavy transport aircraft, all are there. They say, oh, we are just transporting food and equipment for the scientists. Right, but that equipment is dual use. A radar system to study the atmosphere can also be used to track ballistic missiles. An airport serving science can turn into a strategic airbase in less than 24 hours if circumstances require. Antarctica is not a demilitarized zone. It is a dormant military base, always on standby. The Soviet Union was the same, and Russia today is too. Everyone is playing the same game, hiding guns under the bed and pretending to be asleep. When the official door closes, the backstage window opens wide. The Antarctic Treaty bans the military, but it became a paradise for intelligence. Declassified CIA documents from the 60s and 70s show a completely different picture. They didn't go there to watch penguins. They went to monitor the Soviet Union. Are the Russians building missile silos? Did they find something they didn't report in treaty meetings? The KGB did exactly the same with the Americans. The consequence? We have two parallel streams of information. Public stream, boring scientific reports about krill and melting ice. Underground stream, top-secret intelligence reports about real capabilities and anomalous discoveries. The treaty created a perfect gray zone. Spies wear parka jackets, wear researcher badges, and observe each other through binoculars. International cooperation is just the icing on a cake full of razor blades. But how to control thousands of civilian scientists? You can't threaten to kill all of them. Too noisy. Easier way. Control their wallets. After the 1950s, the research funding model changed completely. Governments poured tons of money into Antarctica, but government money always comes with strings attached. You want $5 million for your ice drilling project? Fine, but you have to drill here, not there. And before publishing results, you must show it to the committee for review first. Private funding sources are the same, often coming from foundations run by elite networks. They shape the research questions. They make Antarctic science both more active and more controlled. You are allowed to work, allowed to be busy, but only inside the box they drew. This leads to a tragedy in the scientific community that few talk about. It divides researchers into three types of people. The compliant, they accept the official story, take funding, get promoted, and live comfortably. They convince themselves that this is true science. The silent, they see anomalies, they suspect, but they look at the example of Brian Mullins or Jerome Truffaut, the dead men I told you about in part 1, and they choose silence. They tell themselves, I can do more good if I stay alive and inside the system. The whistleblowers, the brave few or the crazy ones, they risk their careers to speak the truth and often end up being expelled from the scientific community, considered paranoid. The Antarctic scientific community is not a unified block seeking truth. It is a fragmented collection, manipulated by fear and ambition. And when science is gagged, when the military hides in the shadows, the public, you and me, are left with crumbs of the truth, crumbs that have deformed into myths. In the final part, we will see how these buried mysteries took revenge. From Lovecraft's monsters to Nazi flying saucers, the truth, when compressed too tightly, will explode into cultural nightmares. Do you know what happens when you try to submerge a ball underwater? The harder you push, the stronger it bounces back. The truth is the same. They tried to bury Antarctica under tons of treaties, laws, and intimidation. But they forgot one thing. Human imagination is censor-proof. When official reports are silent, legends begin to speak. Welcome to the final part of the journey, where we will see how suppressed secrets have deformed into cultural monsters, and why 2048 might be the doomsday of peace. Let's go back to 1936. H.P. Lovecraft wrote the classic novel At the Mountains of Madness. He described an ancient, terrifying civilization lying deep in the gut of Antarctica. That's fiction, right? But why does it haunt us so much? Because Lovecraft touched a raw nerve. He wrote what explorers whispered in taverns but dared not put in reports. His work became a template. Antarctica isn't just cold. It harbors something. And when the government creates information voids, the public fills them with conspiracy theories. Hollow Earth theory? Sounds crazy, right? But diaries, allegedly, of Admiral Byrd about flying into the center of the Earth are still passed around. Why? Not because people are stupid, but because they know the official story isn't convincing enough. If Antarctica is just ice, why hide it so carefully? Then come the Nazis and UFOs, strange lights, technologies ahead of their time. People believe Hitler didn't die in the Berlin bunker, but escaped to Neuschwabenland in Antarctica. Whether you believe it or not, these legends are a cultural defense mechanism. It is society's way of screaming, "We know you are hiding something." But let's push aliens aside. Let's talk about things that make history professors break out in a cold sweat. Ancient maps like the Piri Reis map, depicting the Antarctic coastline with amazing accuracy, but as an ice-free coastline. How did sailors from the 16th century, or earlier, know the shape of the continent lying under kilometers of thick ice? Modern climate science accidentally betrayed concealment efforts. Ice cores show Antarctica used to be warm, used to be green. This opens up a terrifying possibility for mainstream history. Humans were there. Not penguins. Humans. Or an advanced civilization that was wiped out and swallowed by frost. They don't want us digging there because they are afraid we will find ruins that don't fit the timeline of history textbooks. A relic that could rewrite the entire origin of humanity. But all of the above is just the past. Look to the future. Look at your wallet. Superpowers don't spend billions of dollars just for sightseeing. They are playing a century-long game of Go. The Antarctic Treaty has a time bomb. The Protocol on Environmental Protection, banning mineral mining, can be reviewed in 2048. Energy corporations, mining companies are salivating. Under that ice is oil, rare earths, uranium, resources that define the 21st century. The current scientific presence is essentially squatting. They plant flags, build stations, maintain presence so that when the bell of 2048 tolls, they will be the first to drive the drill down. Antarctica still has no clear sovereignty? Don't be naive. It has already been carved up on secret maps in the meeting rooms of the elite. We are often taught that this is a land of science, a sanctuary of peace, where nations set aside guns to study penguins and glaciers together. A beautiful fairy tale, isn't it? But what if I told you that eternal ice isn't just hiding dirt and rocks, but it is covering a massive master plan of the elite? Look closer at what they leave behind. Not trash or broken equipment, but symbols. Silent signs, but screaming the truth. We will talk about who actually owns Antarctica, and why they mark their territory with symbols that should only appear in esoteric rituals. You think great explorers planted flags out of patriotism? Think again. Look at the British Empire's expeditions. Sure, they flew the Union Jack fluttering in the snow wind for propaganda photos. But in hidden corners, on the most crucial equipment, and in command tents, what they worshipped wasn't the national flag, but the royal coat of arms. Why is this detail important? Because in the language of power, nation and crown are two different concepts. When they stamp the royal crest on ice and snow, they are declaring, "This land does not belong to the British people. It is the king's backyard, and not just the British." Look at the Norwegians. Their expeditions were covered in symbols and sigils specific to King Haakon VII. They marked equipment, boundary markers with the king's seal. This shows us an ironic truth. Antarctica, in the eyes of the old elite, was never international land. They considered it an extension of dynastic property. An ancient feudal power system is still running smoothly under the cover of modern democratic nations. They are carving up this frozen cake based on bloodlines, not based on votes. But the greed of kings is just the surface. Let's go deeper into the ice itself. For decades, pilots and explorers have reported things that shouldn't be there. Nature, as we know, loves chaos. But Antarctica is scattered with chilling perfection. Reports from many independent expeditions, people who don't even like each other, all describe the same thing. Perfect circles carved deep into the ice, sharp triangular structures on cliffs, and strangest of all, perfectly regular hexagonal patterns. Geologists will jump up and say, "Zorro, that's just crystal structure. That's natural erosion." Oh, of course. Basalt can crack in hexagonal shapes. I don't deny that. But listen closely to this. The specificity in the descriptions suggests that the observers, who were experts, clearly distinguished between natural geology and artificial patterns. Some rare photos leaked out, and believe me, many have been lost in archives, show these shapes repeating intentionally. Either Antarctica has a freakish geology unlike anywhere else on Earth, or someone was here, and they liked math. Now fasten your seatbelts, because we are diving into the deep waters of conspiracy theory, where coincidence becomes too ridiculous. Have you ever wondered why research stations are placed at those exact coordinates? When you connect the dots on the map of Antarctica, from British, Norwegian to American stations, a pattern starts to emerge. These coordinate numbers, when analyzed under a numerology perspective, strangely match the distances and angles of ancient sacred sites around the world. The Giza pyramids, Stonehenge. It seems they are all talking to Antarctic stations through a mysterious geometric language. Why? The answer might lie in the pockets of those who set foot here. Freemasonry. Don't roll your eyes yet. This isn't fiction. The square and compass, the all-seeing eye, typical symbols of Freemasonry, appeared in photos of equipment, flag designs, and architecture of early Antarctic buildings. Many expedition leaders and financial sponsors held high ranks in the order. To them, geometry isn't just math. It is the language of God, ancient wisdom. Their journey to Antarctica, obsessed with geometric anomalies here, suggests they believe they are recovering the legacy of prehistoric grand architects. They didn't go to draw maps. They went to find ancestors. And not just Freemasonry. Look at the map again. You will see the name Cross appear unreasonably often. Cape Cross, Cross Sound, Mount Cross. This density far exceeds coincidence or normal Christian piety. In the world of symbols, the cross predates Jesus. It is a solar symbol, a sign of the four directions, the axis of the world. Are they marking Antarctica as a spiritual focal point where ancient knowledge can be restored? And then we have the Norwegians with their Viking obsession. Queen Maud Land, territory claimed by Norway. They named subdivisions after Norse mythology. There are reports of finding runes carved on cliffs. What are they trying to prove? That Vikings were here centuries before Columbus? That Nordic blood conquered both poles of the earth? But the peak of symbolic madness must belong to the Germans. 1938, the new Swabia, Neuschwabenland expedition. The Nazis didn't just come to sightsee, they brought thousands of metal poles. On each of those poles was the swastika. They dropped them from planes, carpet bombing a vast territory. Remember, the Nazis considered the swastika a symbol of ancient Aryan wisdom. Their planting of this symbol into the heart of Antarctica wasn't just an act of political claim. It was an occult ritual. They were stamping this continent, connecting it to the divine Aryan bloodline in their imagination. Let's step back and look at the big picture. UK, USA, Norway, Nazi Germany, Soviet Union. On newspapers, they are enemies, rivals, opposing ideologies. But in Antarctica, under the freezing ice, their actions are strangely synchronized. All use symbols. All are obsessed with geometry. All behave as if they are protecting a shared secret, an esoteric legacy that the masses, you and me, are not allowed to understand. There is a tacit unity among these superpowers. They share hidden knowledge that Antarctica is not just ice. It is the key. And those maps, those landmark poles, are messages they leave for each other, the enlightened ones. But that is only what they left on the surface. What is really happening when modern technology starts looking through the ice? When electronic eyes from satellites start peeling back what lies deep underground? In the next part, we will go from silent symbols to shocking discoveries of the 21st century. Giant structures under the ice, and what is really waiting for us when the ice melts. Keep a cool head, because things are about to heat up. Welcome to the 21st century. In the previous part, we saw dreamers drawing charms on snow and ice, but the age of cloth flags and compasses is over. Now is the era of satellites, ground-penetrating radar, and emotionless automated machines. You would think that with technology capable of reading license plates from outer space, we would have stripped bare every secret of Antarctica by now, right? Mistake. Technology doesn't clear up mystery. It only shows us how deep this rabbit hole goes. And the most interesting thing? The Earth itself is helping us unlock it. Let's talk about climate change. Don't worry, I'm not here to preach about carbon emissions or urge you to ride a bike. I want to talk about the aspect few dare to discuss, the exposure. Antarctica used to be a frozen crypt, a permanently stable archive, but now it is sweating. Coastal areas buried for millennia are starting to melt seasonally. Imagine you are looking at a stage curtain slowly being lifted. Cliffs, valleys, and terrain that human eyes have never seen in all human history suddenly appear under the sun. From 2015 to 2025, a series of strange discoveries emerged from these newly exposed lands. Geologists, people usually only excited by rocks, started whispering about unusually regular rock structures. And more interestingly, metallic objects of unknown origin were found in places where, according to history books, there had never been a human footprint. What do authorities say? Oh, that's just natural geological process. Or maybe trash blown from some research station. Really? Trash flies hundreds of miles through snowstorms and lands precisely in a valley that just thawed yesterday? Independent researchers don't buy that story. They ask the question everyone wants to avoid. What is that ice preserved? Is it hiding evidence of pre-modern human presence? Or something even more alien? But access rights to these areas are controlled tighter than Fort Knox gold. The Antarctic Treaty requires a permit, and the permit decides what you get to see. If the surface isn't enough to give you chills, look down below, deeper. Modern satellite technology has given us God's eyes, the ability to look through miles of dense ice as if looking through a pane of glass. And what radar sees? Well, it defies every geological law you ever learned. In 2006, not 2001 as some false rumors claim, satellite radar detected a massive object beneath the Wilkes Land region in East Antarctica. A gigantic structure, hundreds of miles wide. Mainstream scientists rush to offer the safest explanation. It's a meteorite crater, the impact that killed the dinosaurs. Maybe, but look at the data. Its scale and geometric characteristics are too perfect. Some analyses point out geometric regularities that natural rock rarely creates, unless Mother Nature suddenly wanted to play Lego. This leads to two possibilities. It is the most bizarre natural rock structure on the planet. It is something built. But ambiguity is still king. To know for sure, we have to drill through miles of ice. And guess what? No one is in a rush to do that. The reasons given are environmental concerns and logistical challenges. Or are they afraid of what they will find when the drill hits bottom? Speaking of ice drilling, We cannot ignore the Russians and their obsession with Lake Vostok. This is not a village pond. This is a massive liquid lake, sealed under 4 kilometers of ice for perhaps millions of years. A completely isolated world, no light, extreme pressure. In 2012, after decades of effort like madmen, Russian drilling teams finally pierced the ice and reached the lake water. The whole world held its breath. What did they find? Official announcement. We found microbes. Life evolved in isolation. Great. But that's when things got murky. Full analysis results were suddenly restricted. Russian authorities became unusually secretive, only trickling basic information to the international community. Why hide a few bacteria? Unless it's not just bacteria. Rumors spreading in the research community are much creepier. They talk about complex organic structures. They talk about anomalies in water chemistry suggesting the environment down there is unlike any natural ecosystem. There is a hypothesis that Lake Vostok and other subglacial lakes are not just lakes, they are shelters. Or worse, ancient biological laboratories that we just accidentally opened. This selective disclosure pattern is a blazing red flag. It shows information is being managed, carefully screened before throwing harmless crumbs to the public. We are living in a bitter paradox. We have ground-penetrating radar, DNA analysis, radiometric dating, technologies that explorers in 1940 couldn't even dream of. Logically, questions about pre-modern civilization or artificial structures should have been settled by now, right? Why haven't they been settled? There are 2 possibilities. There is nothing there. We are just paranoid. Evidence has been found, but it is being suppressed. Results are being hidden. Frustration is spreading in the genuine research community. They know that Antarctica's secret could be decoded tomorrow if there were institutional will to publicize it. But that will does not exist. Instead, we see a rise in other shady activities, not just science, but politics, royals, emerging superpowers. In the next part, we will strip away the scientific research cover to look at the real geopolitical chessboard. Why did Prince Harry trek to Antarctica? Why is China building research stations frantically? And what does the fateful date of 2048 mean for the future of humanity? Hold tight to your chair. The Game of Thrones Ice Edition is about to begin. Welcome back to the negotiation table. We have talked about mysterious symbols of the past and the chilling discoveries of the present. But don't be naive enough to think that Antarctica is just a playground for archaeologists or crazy drillers. No. Antarctica is the largest, coldest, and most ruthless geopolitical chessboard on the planet. While you are busy worrying about what to eat today, superpowers and ancient bloodlines are silently arranging their forces for a war without gunshots, all pointing towards one number, 2048. Do you remember I told you about Antarctica once being considered dynastic property? Don't think that mindset died in the 19th century. It just changed costumes. Look at Prince Harry of the United Kingdom. In 2013, he participated in the Walking with the Wounded expedition to Antarctica. The media praised it as a wonderful charitable effort for veterans, and I don't deny that. But through the lens of Zorro, nothing is random. That trip was a subtle reminder. The royal family is still here. It maintains the symbolic connection between the throne and the frozen continent. It ensures that when history continues to be written, the Mark of Windsor remains on the snow. And not just the British. The Norwegian royal family still closely sponsors the Polar Institute. They participate in anniversaries, maintaining the exploration legacy of their Viking ancestors. Why does the aristocracy care so much about an iceberg? Maybe they just like penguins. Or maybe These networks help them access private information, uncensored reports on what is actually found under the ice, before the public even knows of their existence. But the royals aren't the only players. Let's welcome the billionaire explorers. Antarctic tourism is booming, but beside harmless sightseeing tours, there are private research projects funded by giant corporations and ultra-wealthy individuals. What are they doing there? They say scientific research and commerce. But look at their itineraries. Many of these private projects focus on exactly the areas where historical records imply there are anomalies. What is their advantage? They are not governments. They are less bound by bulky bureaucracy. And most importantly, they have no obligation to publicize their findings. If a private expedition finds a black pyramid or ancient technology, do you think they will call CNN? Or will they hide it in the corporation's private vault? The presence of private capital creates an underground channel to exploit Antarctica, bypassing all international controls and treaties. Now, look at the real giants. On paper, the Antarctic Treaty says this is a land of peace and science. In reality, research stations resemble disguised military outposts. China. Since the 1980s, they have expanded frantically. They build station after station, rooting deep into the continent. Their goal? Not just climate. It is strategic positioning. They are redrawing the map of power, ensuring that when the race starts, they will be at the finish line. Russia. They never really left the Cold War mindset behind. Their presence in Antarctica is fortified, sullen, and threatening. They hold key geographical positions and possess the ability to operate in conditions where others have to give up. The US, UK, and Australia look at this with suspicious eyes. They ask themselves, does counting the amount of melting ice really require such sophisticated satellite surveillance equipment and military communication systems? The answer is no. This underground competition suggests that Antarctica is far more strategically important than environmental protection. These nations know something. They are saving their spots. And here is the reason for all this madness. Remember this number, the year 2048. That is the time when the Protocol on Environmental Protection under the Antarctic Treaty can be brought up for review. Currently, it bans mineral mining. But that ban is not eternal. Nations don't pour billions of dollars into ice and snow just out of kindness. They are playing a long game. They have to maintain presence, collect geological data, and stake sovereignty claims decades before mining becomes legal. Imagine oil, gas, rare minerals, and possibly buried ancient technologies. When the clock strikes 2048, or even sooner if the world thirsts for resources, that peace treaty could be torn up in the blink of an eye. The actions of China, Russia, and the US right now are not random. It is preparation for the final gold rush on Earth. This pattern shows that the mysteries of Antarctica are not just historical ghost stories. It is shaping the foreign policy of superpowers right now. What was discovered in the past, what is being hidden in the present, and the calculations for the future, all are interwoven. But the biggest question remains, why are they so afraid of revealing the truth? Why hide discoveries from Operation Highjump until now? Perhaps what they found isn't just resources. We have passed through arrogant royal symbols, earth-piercing drills, and the ruthless political chessboard. But after all that noise, the scariest thing about Antarctica is not what they say. It is what they don't say. In history, silence is never accidental. When a file goes missing, when a diary has pages torn out, when a famous admiral suddenly shuts his mouth, that is when you know you are touching the truth. Let's go back to February 1947, Operation Highjump. The U.S. sent a massive fleet to Antarctica: aircraft carriers, destroyers, submarines, and thousands of Marines. Leading them was Admiral Richard E. Byrd, a polar legend. Stated goal: training exercises and equipment testing. Expected duration: 6 to 8 months. But reality? They retreated after just a few weeks. What do history books say? Equipment failure due to bad weather. Sorry, but Byrd and his men weren't amateurs on a summer camping trip. They were armed to the teeth with the best military technology of the time. A fleet like that doesn't turn tail and run because of wind and snow. Listen to what Byrd told the Chilean press immediately after returning. Before he was gagged, he warned of hostile aircraft capable of flying from pole to pole with incredible speed. He spoke of a threat from the polar region. In the context of 1947, who had that capability? The Soviets? No. Nazi remnants? Or something else that was already waiting there? Why are Highjump files still classified after nearly 80 years? If it was just weather and penguins, why hide it? This persistent concealment is the clearest proof that they encountered something. A base? A ruin? Or a defense force that American bullets couldn't penetrate? If you think Highjump is strange, look at these tattered old papers. The Peary Race Map, 1513. The Orontius Phineas Map, 1531. They depict the Antarctic coastline with chilling accuracy. Not icebergs, but landmass. They draw exact rivers, valleys, and bays, things that are currently lying under miles of snow and ice. Mainstream historians sneer, just a coincidence. They just drew randomly and got lucky. Coincidence? Accurately drawing an entire undiscovered continent by guessing? That is the laziest explanation I have ever heard. To draw these maps, one needs two things: the ability to survey from above, aviation. Doing it at a time when Antarctica was not frozen. This is a slap in the face of conventional history. It suggests that either human civilization is much older and more advanced than we think, or this knowledge comes from a non-human origin. Whatever it is, these maps are physical proof that we are being lied to about our own past. Do you believe in bad luck? Because the history of Antarctic exploration is full of suspicious bad luck. Ask the British Museum. Why don't they publicly catalog items from certain Antarctic expeditions? Ask about the diary of Roald Amundsen, the first person to reach the South Pole. Why are there gaps? Why did crucial pages disappear mysteriously? Ask about the Nazi and Soviet files. Tons of documents, photos, specimen reports, evaporated. We are told they were lost due to fire, war, negligence. Once is an accident. Twice is a coincidence. But when it happens continuously, over decades, across national borders, that is a pattern. That is the sanitization of knowledge. There are things that were found, artifacts, technology, or records that the elite decided the public was not allowed to see. They didn't lose them. They put them away in warehouses so deep that Indiana Jones couldn't even find them. And finally, the biggest question: why? Why does the Antarctic Treaty create a permanent state of limbo? Why do 7 nations keep claiming sovereignty, but no one enforces it? And others don't recognize it, but don't object either. It is like a tacit agreement between mafia bosses. No one gets to monopolize this table because what lies on the table is too dangerous to belong to one person. This ambiguity is designed ambiguity. It keeps outsiders out, while allowing insiders to continue silently digging. Imagine Antarctica as God's giant freezer, or the devil's, depending on how you look at it. It contains an intact archive of everything that happened before ice covered this continent. We aren't just talking about a few microbes or ancient pollen. As the climate warms, whether you believe in climate change or think it's a political hoax, the physical fact is the ice is receding. This archive is slowly opening its doors. Scientists, with thick glasses and complex charts, estimate that in the next few decades, we will see new coastlines, mysterious valleys, and terrain features hidden for millennia. But here is the interesting part: unpredictability. You see, when you dig a hole in the backyard, you know you might find worms or tree roots. But when you melt a continent, possibilities range from harmless paleontological discoveries to evidence of ancient human activity that mainstream history swears on its life does not exist. Or even more interesting, remnants of recent secret facilities. Think about it. If you wanted to hide something, a technology, an experiment, or a corpse, where would you hide it? Times Square? No. You hide it in a place where nature will kill anyone who dares to come looking. But nature is betraying the keepers of the secret. Satellites today can see your license plate from space. As the ice melts, artificial features will become tangible. And then the excuse, "it's just ice," will no longer work. But wait, let's stop for a moment. Let's use our skeptical heads. Thousands of people. I repeat, thousands of people. Military personnel, scientists, cooks, engineers, janitors. They have lived and worked there over decades. We are talking about a massive workforce constantly rotating. And so why? Is there no Edward Snowden of Antarctica? Why hasn't a major whistleblower stepped into the light with a USB drive full of photos of aliens or Nazi bases? Not a single piece of verified evidence. Just rumors on internet forums at 3 a.m. There are two explanations for this absolute silence, and both are equally terrifying. First, there is nothing there at all. It's all just the rich imagination of idle people. Smirks. But if you believed that, you would have turned off this video long ago. Second, and the possibility I bet on, an incredibly effective deterrence mechanism. Think about the pressure. Non-disclosure agreements, NDAs, as thick as a phone book, the fear of career ruin, being stripped of degrees, or more direct pressures, the kind that makes you never dare to open your mouth, or worse, makes you disappear literally or figuratively. The absence of evidence in this case is evidence of a perfect control system. It is a grand riddle. These unanswered questions are the fragile line between known truth and the land of speculation. And believe me, the government loves keeping us on this side of the line. But the silence doesn't just come from humans. Antarctica itself is the embodiment of muteness. Imagine standing in the interior. No wind, no birds, no traffic noise. The snow here isn't like the snow in your yard. It absorbs sound like a giant sponge sucking water. Explorers describe it as a profound silence. Sounds meditative, right? Mistake. It is torture. In that absolute absence of sound, the only thing you hear is the blood pounding in your eardrums and the sound of your own breath freezing the moment it escapes your mouth. The noise of mechanical life inside you becomes deafening. What does this silence do to the human mind? It breaks you. It forces the mind to face emptiness, and when the mind finds no external stimulation, it starts creating its own. The first explorers recorded in their diaries a disturbing feeling. They began to doubt their own senses. In that endless whiteness, reality and illusion blur. A structure glimpsed in the distance. Is it a strange natural rock formation? Or an ancient watchtower? A strange humming sound. Is it wind rushing through a crack? Or the engine of a machine lying deep underground? In a normal environment, you would brush it off. Just the wind, you say. But in Antarctica, where sound shouldn't exist, every noise carries a terrifying meaning. This continent is the perfect secret keeper because it suffocates everything. It preserves secrets in cold stillness, waiting for the weak-hearted to go mad before they can find the truth. And then, layered upon that physical silence, is the silence of bureaucracy. The silence regarding Antarctic discoveries is not accidental. It is a choice, a deliberate choice, calculated carefully by governments and ultra-powerful organizations. They possess knowledge, and they choose not to share it with you. They create voids in history. And you know, nature hates voids. Our speculation is just trying to fill the holes they already dug. This is not passive absence. Oh no, it is an active effort. Classified status, archive management, career pressure, public misdirection, national security, scientific integrity. Words that sound so grand, so reasonable. They are perfect shields, but beneath those flashy justifications is a naked truth, preventing knowledge from circulating freely. This system has run smoothly for generations. It is incredibly durable. Even when we have the internet, satellites, WikiLeaks, the wall of ice surrounding Antarctica's secret hasn't had a single real crack yet. But memory works in a very different way. What is written in history books and what haunts the dreams of those who set foot there are two completely different worlds. People often say, history is written by the victors. But in Antarctica, history is written by those who know how to stay silent. Let's talk about memory. Memory is a strange creature, especially when frozen at minus 60 degrees Celsius. There are two versions of Antarctica. Version 1, what you see in museums, in textbooks. Stories of bravery, flag planting, cute emperor penguins. Everything is clean, tidy, and sterile. And version 2, what lies in the heads of those who were actually there. Veterans, old engineers sitting in nursing homes. They carry memories that are never printed on glossy paper. They remember things they saw or were told, but accompanied by a spine-chilling warning. Never mention this again. Personal memory over time is like a Polaroid left in the sun. It fades. It becomes blurry. The memory keeper themselves starts to doubt. Did I really see that shadow move? Or was it just hallucinations from lack of oxygen? But those fragments are still there. Like an itch in the brain, a nagging feeling that the official story is a puzzle missing the most important pieces. So what happens when these witnesses die? Does the truth die with them? Not entirely. There is a kind of underground internet in the polar research community. It is transmission. Old researchers hand down unsolved questions to the younger generation, not in university lectures, but in coffee sessions, conversations on the sidelines of conferences when the microphones are off. Look at this area, they whisper. Don't trust the 1972 data. This curiosity is passed on like a torch in a dark cave. It creates a continuity that official records never have. While government reports try to wipe out traces, these whispers preserve them, maintaining the flame of suspicion across generations. It is like a secret society of truth seekers, operating right under the noses of censors. And speaking of secret societies, look a little higher. Look at the people holding the maps. Have you ever wondered why a deadly continent with only ice and rock attracts such special attention from European royals? Queen Maud Land, Princess Elizabeth Land, Prince Albert Mountains. They say it is scientific patronage, it is national prestige, it is territorial expansion. Smirks. Sounds noble, but look at this pattern. The participation of royal families is not random. It is persistent across decades, across national borders. The legacy here is not science. The legacy here is power. We are seeing the continuation of an ancient feudal pattern, a small elite group, aristocratic bloodlines with tangled connections to each other, hold the keys to one of the largest land masses on Earth. They know what we don't know. They control resources and secrets that commoners, people like you and me, are not allowed to access. In this democratic era, we are taught that power belongs to the people, that knowledge is public property. How naive. Antarctica is living or deadly proof that the so-called democratization of knowledge is just a spectacular scam. Beneath the glamorous cover of international cooperation, Antarctic Treaty, and research for peace, old models are still operating. The elite still controls information. They just changed the name of it. In the old days, they hid secrets in castle dungeons. Today, they hide them behind top-secret classification levels and complex bureaucratic procedures that you need 3 generations of lawyers to penetrate. The philosophical question here isn't just what is in Antarctica, but who allows them to decide what we are allowed to know? Have we really progressed? Or have we simply created more sophisticated forms of information control, where uncrowned kings still silently rule from the shadows, and Antarctica is their private playground? They want to keep Pandora's box shut tight. They want us to believe in fairy tales about heroic explorers, but they forgot one thing. When you try to bury an anomalous truth, you don't kill it. You are just turning it into a time bomb. And when that bomb explodes, it will shake the very foundations of belief that our society stands on. Imagine you are playing a giant jigsaw puzzle called human history. You have finished the sky, finished the ground, finished the Roman and Egyptian empires. Everything looks perfect. But then boom, you find a puzzle piece in Antarctica. And damn it, this piece doesn't fit anywhere. It has a monstrous shape. It denies what you assembled before. When an organization, whether government or scientific council, faces such anomalous evidence, they only have 2 choices. Option A, admit the textbooks are wrong. Tear it down and rebuild. Rewrite history. Shrugs. Too expensive. Too risky. Too humiliating. Therefore, they always choose option B, evidence management. Put more crudely, hide it. Antarctica discoveries seem to have triggered this defensive response. Instead of revising the scientific framework to fit the new reality, they use secret stamps to bend reality to fit the old mold. That is how they protect us from confusion, or rather, protect themselves from the collapse of foundational doctrines. But what is the price for this stability? It robs society of the chance to know who we really are. It prevents us from connecting new knowledge that could decode the planet's past. And more dangerously, it breeds a virus, skepticism. When keen observers notice patterns of information suppression, they start losing faith in everything. If they lied about that pyramid under the ice, are they telling the truth about climate change? About the economy? About medicine? Organizational silence creates black voids, and guess what? Wild speculation will fill them. They choose the comfort of familiar stories over the painful enlightenment of naked truth. They want you to sleep well, believing humans are the sole pinnacle of civilization, and Antarctica is just a lifeless block of ice water. And speaking of that block of ice water, ice in Antarctica isn't just frozen water. It is a perfect metaphor for memory and time. Ice has 2 faces, like a treacherous, two-faced person. On one hand, it preserves. It keeps volcanic ash, cosmic dust, atmospheric composition from hundreds of thousands of years ago. It is the world's most durable hard drive. Scientists drill ice cores and read them like reading Earth's diary. But on the other hand, it conceals. It presses down miles thick on the surface, crushing and covering everything beneath. It blocks every prying eye. Ice preserves perfectly but hides completely. It represents the paradox of humanity. We both want to keep history, yet want to bury its dark or inappropriate chapters. Knowledge in Antarctica is in a state of cryogenic sleep. It is there, it exists, but it is out of reach. Waiting. This leads us to the biggest philosophical question, the question that keeps me awake for many nights. Who has the right to decide what knowledge is too dangerous for humanity? Maybe, just maybe, this suppression is rational. If under that ice is a technology that could blow up the Earth with a snap of fingers, or an ancient bacteria that could wipe out the human race, perhaps we should be grateful for that silence. But leans into camera, whispering menacingly, how do we know they are protecting us or protecting their interests? What stops those in power from abusing the dangerous label to hide truths that merely threaten their power? The example of Antarctica proves this isn't empty theory. Life and death decisions about knowledge access are being made every day by a small group. People who consider themselves parents and treat us like children not old enough to hear adult talk. We are living with the consequences of decisions we were not involved in. We trust, or resent, those who claim to know better than us. The truth is still there. Obscured. Denied. Every generation has to go looking for the questions that the previous generation asked but was silenced. It is a vicious cycle to maintain a power structure based on information asymmetry. But that cycle is about to be broken, because the biggest enemy of secrecy is not humans. That enemy is temperature. In the final part, we will talk about the future. As the ice melts and the year 2048 approaches like a time bomb, are you ready to become a seeker? We have walked through frozen history, through royal ambitions and bright red secret stamps. But now it is time for us to talk frankly with each other. This video is ending. You can turn it off, go back to scrolling TikTok to watch dancing cats and forget everything about Antarctica. That is the easy choice. But I have another invitation for you. Don't be a passive audience member anymore. Become the seeker. Who is the seeker? Someone who knows how to look where others ignore. Someone who knows how to read between the lines. When you read news about Research Station X discovers climate change, ask yourself, why did they build the station at exactly those coordinates? Who funded it? And most importantly, what are they not reporting? The seeker mindset turns you from a sheep consuming information into a wolf hunting for truth. And don't tell me you don't have tools. You are living in the information age. You have an entire arsenal in your pocket. Satellite imagery. It is public. It is free. You can scan every square meter of snow and ice yourself. Look for terrain anomalies, straight structures that nature never creates. Declassified documents. Yes, they are dry, boring, and dusty in online archives. But that is where bodies are hidden. Look for redacted reports, notes in the margins. Old expedition diaries, read memoirs of 19th and 20th century explorers. Pay attention to passages where they describe irrational fear, hallucinations they tried to dismiss. Sometimes the truth lies in what they were most afraid to write down. And the greatest power, collective intelligence. Forums, research communities. What you miss, others will see. We can piece together fragments that no single individual can do alone. This work requires the patience of an archaeologist and the skepticism of a private detective. Why must we hurry? Because the clock is counting down. Antarctica, fundamentally, is the great indifferent one. It was there before us, and will be there after we go. Its secrets are kept not just by the CIA or KGB, but by deadly cold and miles-thick ice. But this greatest temple guard is weakening. The climate is changing faster than any prediction. What took millennia to melt now takes just decades. The ice is receding, and it is forced to reveal what it hides, whether organizations want it or not. And there is one more timeline. The year 2048. That is the year the terms of the Antarctic Treaty can be brought up for review. Superpowers are sharpening their knives. China, Russia, the US. They are all preparing for the day the door swings wide open, when the treaty changes, when the ice melts, the silence will shatter. We are entering a transition phase, where secrets can no longer be maintained the old way. Before we part ways, listen. Do you hear it? The whispers. They exist in ignored footnotes, in the oral histories of Southern Hemisphere indigenous people about the land beyond the frost, in the drunken confessions of old veterans. Don't believe them immediately, but don't be quick to dismiss them either. Live in that uncomfortable space where truth is unclear and speculation is breeding. Antarctica is the final test for human intellect. It demands we open our minds to accept the craziest possibilities, but at the same time, keep a cold head to demand hard evidence. The truth is waiting under the ice, patient as the stars overhead. The question isn't, what is down there? The question is, when it reveals itself, are you brave enough to look straight at it? Listen to the whispers, become a seeker, and see you again in the shadows of history.